globally trending hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter. Our conscience and principles do not permit us, the opposition in Botswana, to remain silent in circumstances where the Zimbabwe state has embarked on a brutal and savage crackdown of its long-suffering citizens. Since pro-democracy and anti-corruption organizations in that country resolved to mobilize the citizenry to take part in peaceful protests which were scheduled for 31st July 2020, the state seems to have lost its sanity and all sense of international shame. Instead of granting audience and finding solutions to the plight of a people bearing the brunt of a collapsed economy, lack of liquidity, rampant unemployment, unbridled corruption, and shortage of goods and services, including basic foods and medicines in this terrible time of COVID-19, the default reaction of ZANU-PF has been to turn to state-sponsored violence against its own citizens. This we see manifesting itself on a daily basis through abductions, assaults, illegal detentions, and surveillance of citizens, including journalists and civic activists behind the campaign. Since independence, Zimbabwe has always been a repressive state, with its people now accustomed to being victims of their own government at regular intervals under ZANU-PF leadership. As neighbors, we have witnessed the Gugurahundi massacre of an estimated 20,000 Zimbabweans in Matebele land and the Midlands. Not a single perpetrator was ever brought to account for what qualifies to be crimes against humanity. This tragic chapter was followed by the imposition of the de facto one-party state, which demonstrated its ugly colors in a series of rigged elections, with its main challenger, the MDC, being at the receiving end of state-driven abductions, unexplained disappearances, and killings. It remains questionable whether ZANU-PF has ever won a clean election since the advent of the MDC. In all of the above instances, as Botswana, the consequence of ZANU-PF repression, misrule, poor governance has spilled across the border into our country in the form of political and economic refugees. Given our small economy and limited range of social and public services, barely enough to sustain our citizens, we have been forced to cushion the costs of ZANU-PF excesses and refusal to treat the citizens of Zimbabwe as principal stockholders of their own country. It is against this background that we say enough is enough. We know ZANU-PF well enough to predict that the ongoing crackdown is being done with an eye on the 2023 general elections, whose run-up will see an escalation of state repression, with Botswana and other neighbors again having to shoulder the burden. We can no longer dismiss Zimbabwe's abnormal state of affairs as their usual normal. In condemning the ZANU-PF government and the use of its security apparatus against innocent citizens, we are appalled by the silence of our own government, which has decided to bury its head in the proverbial sand by adopting a see no evil, hear no evil posture. By saying nothing, the government of Botswana is actually complicit in the atrocities we are witnessing. It is the chilling utterances made by President Munangagwa in his threat to the nation, which he dubbed Address to the Nation, on 7th July 2020, are anything to go by. We must brace for the West in loss of more freedoms, life, and limb. When a president who acquired power through extra-constitutional means sanitized the coup with a rigged election in 2018, and in the process instructing the army to shoot and kill 6 people protesting the results, then we must brave ourselves for the West. We are, however, not surprised by the stance of our government. Since President Masisi assumed leadership, he has gone out of his way to strike a close friendship with President Munangagwa. The two men can now be considered all-weather friends and seem very proud of it. But our president must be warned that for every Zimbabwean abducted, forced to flee the country or killed, he shares some responsibility due to his inability to summon enough courage to tell his friend to desist from his governance methods of repression and tyranny. We also know it's a waste of effort, but for the record, we call on SADC to do the needful and not pretend not to see what is going on in Zimbabwe. In calling on President Munangagwa and his ZANU-PF to immediately seize and desist from terrorizing the people, and releasing all those in detention, we demand that an extraordinary summit of SADC be convened to address the Zimbabwe crisis. It is our belief that the BDP Central Committee will also seize itself with the crisis and have a stern word with its dear friend, ZANU-PF. We further urge civil society in Botswana to rise and mobilize in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe. We urge the unions, clergy, students' formations, and other pro-democracy NGOs to come up with ways to pile pressure on the ZANU-PF regime. To our civil society and NGOs, we say, silence and inaction is not the answer. Today, it is Zimbabwe. Tomorrow, it could be Botswana. And would it be proper for others to shrug their shoulders and say it's a Botswana problem and has nothing to do with us? We conclude by reaffirming our support by saying #Zimbabwean Lives Matter. And this statement has been copied to the SADC chairman, President Cyril Ramaphosa, SADC Secretariat, and the Botswana Civil Society. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.